building the all-concrete house. I had heard from the Lord many times before, and I had attempted many projects and events because I felt prompted to do so. Probably the largest project that required me to lean on the Lord's wisdom, understanding, and guidance, and walk hand in hand with Him daily, was the construction of a very unusual and unique home that we would eventually call our fortress to the Lord. This new home would someday be our new dream home. It would be known as my all-concrete Q-Bond home. And make no mistake about it, I let anyone know who cared to know, from the beginning of the project on, that I felt inclined to construct this home for the glorification of the God I served. I wanted everyone to realize that without God's involvement in this project, it could never be done. And through the years, it has given me a great opportunity to witness to many people about the glory of God and how wonderful it is to have it in my life. Because I believe that it is His will to take people who are willing to believe to the impossible, whatever that may be in their own lives. And I know that these awesome challenges and experiences would have never come to pass without this glory and power that God has for us. This fortress, this house of ours, was a 3,500 square foot, 2-story, all-concrete house that I spent nearly 3 years constructing in my spare time. It was going to be a dream home for me, Miss Debbie, and our children. My plans at the time were to keep it within the family from that point on. It would be built in an amazing way, much different than any house that had ever been built before, and I would build it by myself, under the guidance of this God that I had learned to put all my faith, hope, and trust in. It took 2.5 years of our lives in the early 80s. I was working at the block, brick, and ready-mix company full-time, and I had been working there for approximately 12 years when I had the thought or the idea to begin a project that was out of this world, so to speak. It would be a project of constructing what I knew would someday be our home, our dream home to be exact. I discussed this plan with my wife, Miss Debbie, and she seemed to be up for it, even though it would be the most drastic thing we had ever attempted, most unique and unusual. But in the 80s, that seemed to be just fine. It would allow God to show Himself through the adventures I felt God wanted us to do. I had also shared this upcoming project of ours with several professional business associates that I was in contact with from managing the ready-mix division of the company I had been employed at for 12 years. I played tennis with a couple of them, even before I started the project. But once the project began, I had little time for tennis or much else as far as things that took up my free time. In those 12 years of working at the block, brick, and ready-mix company, I had gone from the least position in the company, a brickyard laborer stacking up and banding loose bricks in the brickyard, to one of the top positions. I had been put in charge of managing the ready-mix concrete department and the material divisions of one of the largest block, brick, and concrete producing companies in the Boot Heel of Southeast Missouri. I had talked about my plans of building this dream home of mine, this fortress of a house, with several of these house-building contractors in the area, and got responses that I wasn't expecting, although maybe I should have. When I told these individuals about my upcoming project, every one of them told me I was crazy for even considering it. Of course, they were looking at it from a logical expectation, and what they said was true, but not for me, and I was quite sure about it. Each and every one of them told me that it would be much too difficult for one person, who knew very little about home construction, to construct a house of that nature. And that nature would be a home that would be built completely from concrete and concrete blocks, roofs included. So describing my plans to these contractors pretty much blew them away, so to speak. I told them that this house of mine would have 8-inch block walls, all of them, interior and exterior, and they would all go up at the same time. But what made it even more unusual, I would not be using mortar between the blocks. Yes, that's right. This block system was called Q-Bond, and when using this system, you just dry stacked the blocks on top of each other, and then trowel on this product called Q-Bond, which was a mortar-like material, on both sides of the wall, giving it twice the strength as a normal mortared wall. And that's what got this project of mine stirred up like you wouldn't believe. Something else that got my house a lot of attention was that I would be designing a special roof system as well. Was that it would be constructed of a specialized concrete and block roof system that I would design. And saying that certainly caught their attention. I explained to them that the entire house would have no wood of any kind in its structure. And each one of these men that I explained this to just looked at me with a rather puzzled and bizarre look, as if maybe I was only joking. Now keep in mind, these men knew all about home construction. They had built many homes in that area, and one of them happened to be the biggest and most prestigious house builders of unusually nice homes in the area. And as I explained the details of what my house would entail, and they realized I was serious, they looked intently into my eyes and said, "Glenn, come on, you need to reconsider this idea of yours. What you are proposing here is rather foolish. In fact, it just can't be done. You don't know enough about construction to do this." Now obviously, if I had not been connected rather intricately to this concrete, block, and ready-mix company, and my boss was not a structural concrete engineer, and I did not have access to the trucks, the boom lifts, and any equipment I might need there at the plant, I would have never considered doing something of this nature. And like I said, they were looking at this through a different set of eyes, and I knew that telling them that it was God who had given me this idea would just make them more skeptical. I knew that someday they would realize the truth. The proof would be in the pudding, so to speak. Now you might think that someone with half a brain would have taken the advice of these professionals who knew all about home construction, and yes, possibly, or probably, reconsidered stepping out of this rather shaky limb, but not me. I was so certain that God had planted the thoughts and ideas about this project squarely within my mind, heart, and soul, that the obvious doubt and concern of these men that I could ever do this didn't even enter my mind or slow me down. In fact, it caused me to become even more enthusiastically charged up about getting the project underway, and of course, completed. I wanted to show these guys they had totally underestimated me. I had talked this plan of mine over with my boss, the engineer, but he was all for it. He was the only person that seemed to get me. And right away, he was ready to work out a special deal with me as far as him doing the structural engineering I would need to even convince the city I knew what I was doing. And again, it made me feel good that he did not seem to have doubts about my ability to start the project or complete it. I mean, this was the owner's son, who was only a few years older than I was, and he told me he would be glad to assist me in my plan. My boss, the structural concrete engineer, the owner's son, had previously designed large bridges in Denver, Colorado. So in my mind, with God leading me every step of the way in building this impossible task and having this brilliant bridge builder engineer backing me up, I thought, what's the problem? It was actually his idea in the first place to have someone, anyone, to build an all-concrete house in that area to promote a special product he had just began producing. So no, it wouldn't be his plan to discourage me or anyone else from doing just that. Therefore, looking back, no matter what concerns he might have had about me personally, his motive might have been to promote this new product, this product called Q-Bond, the product that I would be using to construct my house. But I knew that my relationship with this second man in charge was a good one, and it had been him that had stood behind me as I moved up the ladder in his father's company. I had started with the company several years before he had joined us, after he had moved from Colorado. Here's a picture of Debbie and I sitting in the front yard in 2013. We didn't own the house then. We just stopped and took a few pictures like we did quite often. Here's another picture that's only been a few years ago. It's been 40 years since we moved into the house. A lot of those contractors that tried to talk us out of building our home told me that this house wouldn't stand a year the way I was building it. But I guess I proved them wrong, didn't I?